Now, listen. Before we talk about the ins and outs of parachute payments, can you just explain to us exactly what parachute payments are all about? How do they work between the Premier League and EFL clubs?
Right. Under the agreement that's presently in existence, if you were relegated from the Premier League last season, you'll get around about £42 million from the Premier League because you've got to acclimatise from going from a very high wage bill to the Championship. So it's allowing clubs to, in theory, not go into administration upon relegation. Such is the gap between the two divisions. You get £41 million in the first season, 34 in the second, and if you've been in the Premier League for more than one season, you get a third payment of £16 million in the third year following relegation.
Kieran, does this parachute payment, certainly for the teams that get relegated at the Premier League, does that give them an unfair advantage going on to the next season, certainly against other teams that potentially have been in the Championship for maybe a couple of years? Not even a couple of years, for a while.
It certainly gives them a financial advantage. I've spoken to a few chief executives of clubs that were in the Premier League and then they were relegated, and they say it makes the Premier League more competitive because if you take the case of you're looking at some of the clubs towards the bottom of the Premier League at present, if you're trying to sign a player, say you're trying to sign a player, if you have what, 15, 20 million pounds in the present market, and you're probably going to be offering that player 40 to 50 grand a week, realistically, you could be out of the Premier League in 3 months, and you'd have to offer the player an 80% pay cut to go into the Championship if you've got no parachutes. So the player's probably going to turn around and say no, and therefore you're practically guaranteed to get relegated on the back of that. So that's the benefit of parachute payments. The downside is that it does make it far more difficult for those clubs in the Championship because we had Preston announce its results last week. Preston, from all of the money, from all of the sources, brought in around about 16 or 17 million pounds, and you've got Leicester, Southampton, and Leeds all in receipt of parachutes of 41. So you can see the point of view from the Championship. You can also see the point of view from those clubs towards the bottom of the Premier League.
But it also makes it so much more difficult for, let's say, a side in League One. Let's choose Oxford United if they were to get promotion into the Championship, and a side, let's say Everton, drop down into the Championship from this season's Premier League. It makes it so much more difficult, I think, for a side like Oxford to overtake them in the Championship in the race to get back into the Premier League, doesn't it?
It does, and I think you've got to give Ipswich Town a huge amount of credit. I've looked at the numbers in respect of the three clubs that have just been relegated. Leicester City's squad cost more than 400 million quid when they published their most recent results when we were in the Premier League, and Ipswich were promoted on a squad which cost less than 10 million. So you're trying to mix those two clubs together. And I think it's a lot of credit's got to be given to the clubs that have just gone up because Plymouth Argyle, they've had a good season as well. They're mid-season, they're mid-table, a couple more good results. They could be on the edge of promotion. You've got to be a lot smarter with the money if you've just come up from League One. Such are the huge gaps between the Premier League and the rest of football.
Let me ask you this then, right? So I know football is like no other business, okay? But if I owned 10 businesses and drove a Ferrari, and then for whatever reason 8 of them went under, so I only had 2 left, but whilst I had the 10 successful businesses, I started leasing out a Ferrari. I don't think the bank would ever say to me, we're going to let you acclimatise to just having 2 businesses now, and we're going to give you some more money towards the payment of your Ferrari. The Ferrari, by the way, in this scenario, are the players. They would say, sell your Ferrari. So if you've got a side, in my opinion, that drop into the Championship and can't afford to pay the players, why don't they have to sell the players?
Well, a lot of clubs do sell the players. If we take the case of Leicester City, for example, they sold James Maddison, they sold Harvey Barnes, Tielemans went on a Bosman. So they did very much hunker down. But if you have to say to all clubs who have relegated, you've got to effectively get rid of the whole of your first team squad, that's also quite harsh on them. And if you use that analogy of some of your businesses going bust, if my local garage goes bust, if my local butcher's goes bust, I'm genuinely sorry. I don't want to see anybody go bust. I don't want to see anybody lose their jobs. football's different because football's part of the community. Football's part of my identity as a football fan. It doesn't matter whether that club is Brighton or Bury or Macclesfield or Manchester United. It's still so much more of a part of you than the local washing machine parts manufacturer. And therefore, there's a case for saying we need to protect football from going out of business more than any other industry because it's so important to us as football fans.
Kieran, I want to take you, obviously, Huddersfield, because they had 3 parachute payments because they were in the Premier League longer than 1 season. So how have they managed to get it so wrong then? Because they've received a lot of money from dropping out of the Premier League. They were in the Premier League for 2 seasons, I think back in 2018-19 when they got relegated. How have they managed to mess it up so badly?
Well, they're spending money and they're spending money well. And I think in the case of Huddersfield Town, in their second season in the Premier League, they didn't necessarily buy particularly well. They had players who struggled to sell, who were on quite decent contracts in those first couple of seasons back in the Championship. And therefore, the financial advantage that they had was being frittered away because they couldn't shift the players because nobody else was willing to match the wages they were already on. And the players themselves didn't necessarily acclimatise because you know as a professional yourself, there's a hell of a difference between a 38-match Premier League season where you're effectively positioning yourself for the match and you're doing your drills and everything from the Monday through to the Friday, comparing that to the Championship where you've got that Saturday, Tuesday regime.
How are the two connected then? How does the financial fair play, how is that affected by a club that's been relegated from the Premier League into the Championship and they are getting three lumps of money over 3 seasons? How does that affect their financial fair play?
Well, when you do your calculation of financial fair play, if you've been in the Championship for 3 seasons, you're allowed to lose a maximum of £39 million. So that's 13 million for each season. But if you've dropped down from the Premier League, you're allowed to lose 35 million for each season you've been in the Premier League and 13 for each season in the Championship. So if we take a look at Leicester City, Leeds and Southampton, this season, they will say, well, the last 3 years, 2 years in the Premier League, that's 70 million plus 13 million in the Championship. So they can lose 83 million pounds. And clubs, the likes of Bristol City, the likes of Millwall, who have been in the Championship for 3 years, can only use 39. So again, it's a financial advantage to those clubs that have just been relegated.
Kieran, let me ask you, in our show meeting, I said to my producer, can I ask Kieran about this? And he went, these are his words, ask him whatever you want. He knows everything. Okay?
Okay.
How does European financial fair play work?
Well, we've just seen a change in European financial fair play, and they're now referring to it as financial and sustainability rules. And we've moved from the loss-making system that we've got in the Premier League to a wage cap. So this season, a club that's competing within UEFA's framework can spend 90% or up to 90% of its income on wages plus agents' fees plus transfer fees or your net transfer fee. That's going to drop to 80% next season. And then in 25-26, it's going to drop to 70%. And the Premier League's going to follow that in all probability from this summer.
Wow. Okay. Do you think we'll see it? I think I'm right in saying in non-league football, they don't have one at the moment. Is that right? They don't have financial fair play.
Yes, so if you drop down to the National League, there's no equivalent. We saw Stockport County promoted very recently, and they had the biggest ever losses in the history of the National League. They were losing,
bigger than Wrexham?
Bigger than Wrexham. For all of Wrexham are spending money, but they've also got those very, very high profile sponsors, the likes of TikTok and so on. Which have helped Wrexham to bring in the money, as has the documentary series itself. So I'd anticipate Wrexham, a lot of money coming in, a lot of money going out.
So do you? Because financial fair play, one of the main reasons it's been put in place is to protect smaller clubs or clubs, but predominantly smaller ones. I would imagine they're more in risk of going out of business. So do you think there'll ever be a time when financial fair play is brought into non-league football?
I think when we've got the independent regulator on board, which is likely to happen next year, its remit extends to the National League. So I suspect that they will be encouraging the National League to buy into that. And that would also be part of any deal to have a 3 up and 3 down from the EFL to the National League.
I think my producer's right. You do know everything, Kieran.
talkSPORT Drive. Super opinionated sporting debate. Monday to Friday afternoon from 4 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.